I have spent the last week playing Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Now I've got to be real with you, I wasn't planning on making a video about this. I wanted to play it genuinely out of curiosity as to whether I will enjoy it, but having played it, I really need to talk about it. Now I'm going into this whilst not being a fan of Indiana Jones. It's not that I didn't like the films, but I've watched them once and it was years ago and I can't really remember them. So that raises a few questions for us in this review. How will a non-Indiana Jones fan find an Indiana Jones game? Are there going to be any issues specific to people like me who haven't watched the films that the people who have watched the films won't have? Well, that's what I hope to answer for you all today. But before we can do that, there's two things I want to quickly get out of the way. The first thing I want to get out of the way is that this video is spoiler free, so hooray for that. I'll be talking about the story very briefly in this, and I'll have no spoilers at all. That being said, there'll be gameplay obviously from the game in various levels and areas, so if you want no spoilers whatsoever, I don't know why you're watching a review, to be completely honest with you. But yeah, obviously on screen there's going to be a couple things that show off parts of the game you will not see for a few hours at least. And the second thing is, if you can't tell, I am incredibly sick right now. So if I sound a little bit off, I apologise. I'm here, I'm not depressed bro, I'm happy, I just don't feel good. Okay, let's get straight into the video. So, since we can't really talk about the story too much in this video, let's get my comments on it out the way. The quality overall is pretty good. You will enjoy this whether you're a fan of Indiana Jones or whether you're not a fan of Indiana Jones. It's a bit of a classic tale. You know, you're Indiana Jones, you're exploring ruins, you're killing those evil German soldiers that I won't say the name of, and of course you're finding artifacts and such. It's a bit of a typical adventure. There's plenty of likeable characters throughout the story. All the actors absolutely crush their performances in this game, including the main man Indy himself, who of course is voiced by Troy Baker, who I have to add is an incredible voice actor for Indy. Obviously it's weird hearing him not being well Saints Row, but I've got to say man, he brings the characters to life. I think he did an excellent job. As I say, I'm going to keep it short and sweet. The only thing you'll really be missing if you're not an Indiana Jones fan going into this story are some of the references, which to be honest, it won't really matter. You can completely understand the story, completely enjoy the story as a separate thing from the films. And it's also just a delightful story as a whole. It's really well wrote, really enjoyable, plenty of really cool climactic moments, and amazing set pieces. You'll love it. Okay, so now that that's out the way, let's get into the hot topic about this game. Leading up to the release, there was one thing that really confused fans across the board, and that was that Indiana Jones is going to be first person. And I'll admit, I was on this bandwagon. I was a bit like, guys, I've played Uncharted. It's excellent, and it's in third person. I've played Tomb Raider, another excellent franchise that's also in third person. Why would you try and transform this genre into first person? But I have to say, I actually enjoyed it more than I thought I would. I find that being in first person actually fits this game really well, especially when you're up and close with certain things. You'll have boss battles, for example, which I think work completely well in first person, especially with the hand-to-hand combat. Of course, Indiana Jones is a lot more based around the hand-to-hand melee sort of stuff, so being in first person and allowing that to be a bit more fleshed out is great. In third person, I think you'd struggle to make it feel as satisfying. I also think it's good for stuff like puzzles and when you want to put your hands inside of ruins and stuff when you're crawling, and this game kind of relies a lot on kind of creeping you out, and I think first person's really good for that. That being said, I think it has a couple issues. A lot of them I'll get to towards the back end of this video in more specific areas, but one thing I could talk about now is swinging with the whip. I'm going to talk about traversal a bit more later on in the video, but one thing that really pissed me off was when I was swinging with my whip in this game trying to jump over gaps, I felt that the moment you switch to third person was just too late. You hook your whip on and you're still in first person, you take that jump and you're still in first person, and then halfway through the swing, that's when it switches to third. This to me just really confused me and threw me off when I'm trying to gauge how far and fast I should be going. In my opinion, Indiana Jones should have switched to third person the second your whip hooks onto a location. It's not a major issue, but I think it's one of the things that's going to be really specific to this game. And hopefully if we ever get a sequel, it's something I'd want to see them improve on. But the one great thing about it being in first person is hopefully it will separate it a bit from the Uncharted claims. Now a lot of people have been claiming that this game is just Uncharted for Xbox. I'll admit, I haven't played the game, there are elements of it, 100%. If you're an Uncharted fan, I ain't gonna lie bro. You're gonna like Indiana Jones. Even if you don't like the films, as an Uncharted fan like I am, like I'm a major fan of the Uncharted franchise, this scratched that itch for me. It really did. But it does distinguish itself enough from Uncharted, which is important, and I think first person is one of the ways it does that. So yeah, I do think having it be in first person is actually very beneficial for it. It does help it separate that little bit from Uncharted and Tomb Raider and make it more of its own thing. Not that it's not without it, but I think it just helps. Going back to combat as I spoke about, this has to be one of the things where I'm a bit mixed on for this game, to be honest. I really wanted to love the combat of Indiana Jones. I mean, you're damn Indiana Jones. But I feel like in this game, there are just so many things holding it back from me loving it, that it just kind of frustrates me. But let's talk about the good things, okay? Punching people feels fun. Now, you got to understand, there's plenty of games out there where you're punching people and it doesn't feel fun. This ain't that. In this game, punching people is satisfying. You've got the sound effects, you've got the great facial animations, and it feels like they're really weighty punches you're throwing. And of course, in a classic Indiana Jones fashion, you're carrying around a whip. Now, let me tell you, this whip takes me back to the good old days. You know, Indiana Jones on the Wii. Incredible game, and that whip is almost as good as it was there. Let's be real. I mean, listen to the sound effects this damn whip makes. Of course, this game is made by the people who make Wolfenstein, and I've got to say, because of that, the gunplay is pretty damn good too. I'll admit, I was expecting it to feel nicer than it does, but the gunplay is good. It's nothing to complain about, it's serviceable, and I suppose when you think about it, guns aren't really going to be the main focal point of this game. Which brings me to the biggest issue I have with this game, or at least one of them. Indiana Jones is obsessed with dropping weapons. This game should have been called Indiana Jones and the Search for a Backpack, because I swear to God, at any time, at his easiest convenience, Indiana Jones will take a fully loaded weapon that I've managed to loot up from the enemies and just toss it to the side. I understand that this game wants it to feel like an Indiana Jones film, and that means using your environment where you can. I get it, okay? But if I find a weapon that I really like and want to keep for my next engagement, I should be able to do that. If you're climbing something, Indiana Jones throws it. If you need to heal in the middle of a fight, he will drop the weapon to heal instead of just putting it away. You see, I get why they did this. It's because in the films, Indiana Jones kind of uses his whip and uses environment, and this is just not something that the game would have to do. But I think in game form, you need to have it so that you can keep a weapon. Because when you're playing a game, you have to kind of strategize, and I don't think that it works well by having you drop the weapons all the time. I think it can lead to what I will call one-dimensional combat, which is where you kind of have to just run in ill-prepared and make the most of the situation. It's not that it's unfun, it's not that it's bad, but I think in game form, you should be able to keep your weapons, because that leads to the player having a bit more diversity among his playstyle. This is one of the things you may disagree on, but coming from me at least, I felt that a lot of the time, the weapons I wanted to take with me, I couldn't, and then it just led to me beating up a guy and taking his gun, then having to beat up another guy to take his gun, because the gun I wanted to bring with me, I can't. Another thing that really frustrates me is the healing mechanic. It is janky. It is bad, actually. I'll just say it. It's not good. So the problem is, the UI does not catch up with the game, or vice versa. I don't know which one's faster, probably the UI, but I'll be switching through the UI and I'll pull out the bandage. The bandage icon will appear on my screen. Indiana Jones should be holding the bandage to heal. What is he holding? A fucking croissant, or something, a bread, a donut. He's not holding the bandage, because the game hasn't caught up to my request. And it's not that it will catch up eventually, it will just stay mismatched. It makes zero sense. I don't understand why it does this. It's a glitch, I get it, but it's beyond frustrating. And it sounds like I'm being dramatic, of course, but when you're in the middle of a gunfight and you need to quickly switch to a bandage to heal yourself, and instead he decides to get his fucking vitamin C for the day and pull out an orange, you're in a gunfight, you need to heal. So yeah, it's a problem, and it's nothing major, but when you're in the midst of combat, it's not fun to be dealing with. So this is something that, in my opinion, not only should be improved in a sequel, bro, you guys need to drop a patch for it now. But those are my two major issues for combat. On the bright side, I think combat is incredibly well balanced. I played on the moderate difficulty for most of it, because then I eventually started to suck. I'm blaming my illness on that. But I was playing on moderate, and I've got to say, I didn't think it was too hard or too easy for the most part. It felt pretty nice, which is something I like. A lot of games can't balance combat, and it's super annoying. So to have a game that can balance combat really well and make it feel like, you know, I'm not some god, but I can play around the enemies and be really powerful in my own way by learning the game's mechanics, that feels good to me. I like that. Indiana Jones also has his own revolver, which I've got to admit is pretty neat. It's really fun to shoot. He holds it like a badass as well, which might sound dumb, but you know, sometimes it's cool to feel cool, okay? Indiana Jones' pistol, mwah. Beautiful. My big complaint though is you can only hold 12 bullets. What? And sometimes it takes like 2 or 3 shots to kill a guy. Do you understand how many German soldiers I'm going through here? I need more than 12 bullets. But that's not even the worst part. The big problem with this is actually how common finding ammo is. Finding revolver ammo is just rare. It just is. It's not that it's ridiculously impossible, but it's like Resident Evil. It's like, it's scattered around, and you know, it kind of makes you not want to use your gun. And the worst part about it is, even when you do manage to find the rare weapon ammo, you find 4 bullets at a time at most. That's frustrating to me, and it makes me not want to use my pistol when I should be using my pistol. And I don't know, I feel like the game kind of tries to persuade you to playing its specific playstyle, which is run in and find weapons in the environment. You're not allowed to pre-plan. Again, I just think that this kind of kills some player diversity, so it's something I'd want to see maybe improved in the future. But to be honest, as you can probably tell, most of my complaints here stem to me trying to play a way the game doesn't want me to play. Basically, I'm trying to play this not as Indiana Jones, I'm trying to play it as AJ, and that may be the problem here. Maybe the game just doesn't want me to go in being a gun-toting madman, and at the end of the day, this is Indiana Jones. It doesn't really need me to have an arsenal in my back pocket. I can understand why these complaints exist for me personally, but I've got to say, these are still complaints I have, and things that I wish weren't there. But again, this may be because I'm not an Indiana Jones fan, and I'm not playing like, well, Indiana Jones. So even though I sound quite harsh on some elements there, it's not that the combat is unfun, by any stretch of the imagination. When you play the way the game wants you to play, it is really fun. I just think at times it can be a little irritating with how janky it is, or with how the game really doesn't like you picking up weapons and taking weapons with you wherever you want to go. It really wants you to kind of make the most of your current situation when in a fight. And I get it, it's the Indiana Jones style, but it's a little frustrating to me personally. But as a big bright side, one of the most fun things about this game is stealth, and I've got to say, I really liked it. Sometimes it's optional, other times it feels like it's really necessary, but I feel the stealth mechanics are pretty okay for the most part. They're not irritating beyond belief, or unbelievably shallow or anything. It has usual game stealth jank, as you'd expect. You know, there's plenty of times I'm sitting there and I'm like, no way should that enemy see me, but he does. But of course, it's made so much better by all the neat mechanics it has. You can throw bottles, you can do enemy takedowns while stealthing using weapons. You can pull out a whip and pull them towards you, and then beat the ever-living shit out of them when they're on the floor. I love that stuff. I love beating the shit out of people. Speaking of the whip, which of course is Indiana Jones' signature weapon, it's in peak form. You can whip guns out of enemies' hands, then pick up the gun that they dropped on the floor and shoot them in the fucking face. Do you know how cool that is? That is sick. That is a sick thing that I get to do in a video game. I love that. And of course, you can do stuff like whip their arms, and that'll pull them towards you, and you can start beating the shit out of them too. There's basically so much to do with this whip. It actually adds a lot of diversity to the combat, and when you don't have a gun and the enemies do, it's basically the only way to get ahead. Another thing is, the whip will tie into the traversal a bit, which is great. So let's say you're in a stealth situation, and you realise you need to get down from a pretty high height, and there's a lot of enemies around you. Well, just so happens that there's a zipline nearby. Use your whip to zipline down to the bottom. Or perhaps there's a lot of enemies on the ground floor, but just so happens that there's a little military tower next to you. Hook a whip up and climb yourself up, and boom, you're out of the way. I really like that, and traversal is actually one thing I want to compliment about this game. There is a lot of ways to approach situations, and there's a lot of ways to get around. Whether you're crawling through caves, swimming underneath the rivers, or you're in a fucking boat, or a fucking plane for that matter. There's plenty of ways to get around in the game, and it keeps the gameplay really fun and fresh. So of course, we've spoken a lot about traversal and the combat, and obviously briefly touched on the story, but where is all of this happening? Is it going to be a set linear level, or is it open world like against some of the Uncharted games? I'd say it's somewhere in between. When I first saw this game in the trailers, the first thing I thought was, man, this looks linear. It's going to be a very set level, it's going to be super small, it's going to be like walking down an alley and taking out a few soldiers and collecting the prize at the end of the mission. Boom, done. It's not. It actually isn't. There are a ton of these sort of semi-open world levels, and yeah, there's a few invisible walls here and there. Yeah, there's obviously boundaries to it, and it's not as wide and sprawling as a game like fucking Skyrim. But there is plenty for you to explore, and it is pretty freeform. You can go basically wherever you want. There's lots of secrets, there's lots of really cool things to discover, there's plenty of enemies for you to be taken down to. The open world is actually pretty strong. On top of that, these levels, they're actually quite diverse too. You know, sometimes you're in Egypt in the levels of hell, because goddamn I did not enjoy that segment of the game as much as some other people did apparently. Or perhaps you're in Italy, who knows. My point is, the levels are diverse and they look beautiful for that matter. Now, I played this game on PC, I had it around the medium to high presets, and, you know, the game was running nice and smooth, and it looked beautiful, so the graphical quality of this game, man, it's gorgeous. I'd have loved to have seen how this game looks at, like, the most ultra settings, but goddamn, it can be kind of intensive at times, so I wasn't going to play at that, but yeah, man, the game on the settings I had was absolutely beautiful. I think they absolutely crushed it, and the game's style just holds up really well. So, on your adventure, you'll of course be collecting rare artifacts and relics and stuff, and I have to say, this is where the game really kind of let me down a little bit. So, there's like plenty of cool secrets and stuff around the map you can find, and the big thing you'll find yourself collecting a fair amount of are what are called ancient relics. Behold, the ancient relic. Doesn't it look cool? Maybe. But to me, you can't seem to do much with it. It's got no real interesting description. It's just an ancient relic. Now, I don't know if I'm missing something and I haven't found this segment of the game. Maybe there's a side mission where I've got to return all these ancient relics and they're going to give me some cool prizes for it. But to me, they just look really uninteresting, no description, plot points. Again, just to compare this to Uncharted, which I know people are going to get mad at me for the Uncharted comparisons, but it's the most similar game I can think of. When you're playing Uncharted, you'll find rare treasures and stuff, but then you'll be able to look at them, you'll be able to view them. Every item will have this kind of cool, unique little description about itself. You'll learn a bit of lore. But I just have to say, for me, it was a bit disappointing to see all these really cool relics I keep coming across not really have much of a description, or any uniqueness to them. You know, it's kind of like, oh wow, AJ, congratulations, you found 412 Funky Pops around the map. But speaking of side quests, I wasn't really going to touch on this too much, but I suppose it's not really the story. No spoilers though. I have to say, I thought most of them were kind of pointless. I did a couple, and by the end of it, you kind of get some money, you get a little reward, sometimes you just get a bit of dialogue, and that's it. It's not that they're bad, but they just don't feel that important and that weighty to the story. And one thing to note, of course, is that as you progress through the story, a lot of these side quests get cut off when you move on to the next level. So obviously, for example, if you've got side quests in Egypt, and then you move on to the next level, you're not going to be able to go back and do any of them. So I was kind of just in the favour of, you know, let's just progress the story and leave all these non-major ones out there. But I may do another playthrough where I go through and do them and see if there's anything cool in time. So Indiana Jones, of course, will be solving puzzles throughout his many adventures. My thoughts on these were kind of just, they were okay. None of them were like rocket science, they weren't difficult to solve or anything. They weren't overly easy, but I felt they were a bit, well, boring to be honest. I also kind of figured out that most of them are pretty easy to solve, even on accident. For example, there's a puzzle where you have to shine a bit of light, and I won't really go into it so I don't spoil it, but you can kind of just, over time, take guesses at it, and I didn't look up any tutorials, I didn't understand the puzzle at all, but I just kind of brute forced it and it was really easy. And I think that when puzzles are that easy to brute force, it kind of ruins the point of it being a puzzle. That being said though, that was one very specific puzzle and not a major thing at all. This game plays host to a bunch of incredible cutscenes, by the way. You'll be going through and you'll be watching the cutscenes and it will feel like an actual movie. The way they're rendered, everything feels so lifelike and it's like you're sitting back, and if you squint, it would just be like watching a film. There's so many tense moments, there's so many great soundtrack moments too that come with these cutscenes, and yeah, you feel like the build-up is there, and as I say, it's like watching an actual movie. Although I do have one big complaint. As I was watching some of these cutscenes, I don't know if this is a PC specific thing, but as I'm watching some of these cutscenes, man, it was really inconsistent performance-wise. The gameplay would be fine, and then the cutscenes would just randomly drop to like 30 frames per second, or it would have ridiculous stuttering. Nothing major, but it was noticeable at least to me. Now, this wouldn't be too bad if it was just like watching the cutscene, but a lot of them have these like interactive segments, and they just come across as kinda janky and ruin the immersion because of the weird stutter. Like, the low frame rate I can kinda handle, you know, it's whatever. But the way it kinda stutters when you try and do stuff in the cutscene, it can kinda be off-putting, and it threw me off a bit more than I'd have liked. So when you're actually in the gameplay, what is expected of you? What is Indiana Jones' day-to-day life within the game? Well, for the most part, it's beating people up and obviously progressing through the missions, but there's a lot of side stuff to be doing too. So from what I can see, there are missions, side missions, and something called mysteries. Those are the things I've been able to narrow down as like the big things to be doing in the game. So the main missions are the obviously main campaign. These have the big set piece moments, these progress you through the levels, these are the really cool ones. These are the ones that will be taking you down to the really cool and unique dungeons, these are the ones that will be showing you off all the gameplay mechanics it has to offer, and basically these are the ones where you'll be mind blown by. Now, as I touched on slightly earlier, side missions are a bit more of your general go here, go there, bit of a fetch quest type thing. I didn't think they were anything too special. They weren't bad, but they just struck me as a bit generic. Now, the mysteries, on the other hand, I don't really know how to feel about them. From the ones I've played, they were actually quite cool. They typically task Indiana Jones with tracking down some weird mystery, as you'd expect, that were leading to some dungeon, but I never thought they were as elaborate as I'd have liked. But that being said, I do think they lead you to some pretty cool and sometimes even funny locations, so for the most part, I can't complain too much. But of course, when you're in the world, you'll be doing plenty too. For example, the game will want you to be taking photos across the board. You'll be taking photos of cool and unique locations here and there. What do these serve as? I don't really know, to be honest. I'm pretty sure it's just a way of kind of earning yourself some points, because there's a whole upgrade system which I'm going to get into in a second. But for the most part, the game's going to want you to be taking photos across the board of all the big landscapes and everything you need to be doing. Basically, if your system is cool, the game will probably want you to be taking a photo. As I stated, there is obviously the upgrade system in this game, which is kind of simple, to be fair. Throughout the game, you'll find these little comic books. You'll pick them up and it'll be like, if you spend this many weird points that you've earned, I think they're called adventure points, you can unlock some sort of weird ability. Now, I do have a small mini complaint about this. It's not that the whole system's bad. Actually, I quite like it. You know, you kind of are rewarded for exploring a bit more. I like that sort of stuff. But when I played the game, it at no point told me I had to purchase them. So the way it works is you find one of these books, you look at it, it will say it costs, say, 200 points, and you'll unlock more hand-to-hand damage. That's the example I'll give you, right? So you pick up the book and think, well, I've just spent 200 points on it, but hey, now I've got better hand-to-hand damage. Except you then have to go into your inventory, click on the book again, and actually pay for the upgrade. This threw me off hardcore. I'd have much preferred a system where it was like, you can't pick up the book unless you're paying for it. But I can completely understand how that's like, well, what if you want to buy an upgrade later when you have more points? So I get that. But I think it should have been more clear that you haven't purchased the upgrade when you pick it up for the first time, because that really threw me off. One thing in the gameplay that really frustrated me, and I don't know if it's going to be something that will frustrate others, is this system where everything has to be basically a prompt for you to click a couple buttons to do a basic task. Need to unlock a door? Well, it's not just as simple as click X. You have to click X and watch Indiana Jones insert the key. Then click left on a stick, so you turn the key left, and then the door will open. I don't get why it's got to be like this. Just to be simple, okay? I don't see why we need to add this many steps. It's not a major thing, but it just feels a bit silly. Like, there's moments where you need to pull a chain, so you'll have to click X for Indiana Jones to hold onto the chain, and then you click up and down, depending on whether you want it to go up or down. Why not just be one big motion? Or the worst one is levers. Why is it that you have to click X and then push forward to use a lever that only goes one way? You would never ever want to close this lever, so it's completely pointless to have it be anything other than just one single button press. Again, it's not that it's unplayable, it's not that it's broken, it's not that it's even that annoying, but I just kind of think it's, well, pointless. I just don't see the point of making me have to push all these different buttons to do such a simple activity. Throughout your adventure though, you're not alone. You will have a bit of a companion to bring along with you for the ride. Now, I'll admit, there's been a couple times where my companion has gotten in the way when I'm trying to solve a puzzle or something, and I've felt myself become incredibly irritated. But, I'll be honest, they're pretty charming. The companion you main is called Gina, and I'll admit, she's pretty good in a fight, and that is the most important thing to me. I can't stand companions that don't help you when you need them. But that's not the case with Gina. Actually, in this situation, she's pretty damn helpful. She's taking down enemies where she can. She isn't too detectable by stealth. What I mean by that is she's not going to get you caught. It's basically all reliant on you, which is one feature I need in every single game that has stealth. I hate it when my companion gets spotted, so I get spotted. Games that do that are dumb. And also in boss fights, she's a great way to distract the actual boss whilst you're doing some real damage. Speaking of which, by the way, the boss fights in this game are incredible. Oh my god, I had so much fun with these boss fights. Usually they have a bit of a weird gimmick to them, whether that be them only take damage with two-handed weapons, or, you know, you have to sneak up behind them, etc. I don't want to ruin too much, so I don't want to give you too much information on that, but the boss fights in this game will all have a bit of a gimmick, and I think that that makes them really special and goddamn fun. And the boss fight locations are usually really good too, so there's no complaints from me there. You know what, I could go on, but I think I'm going to call it quits here. I've spoke about a bunch of things I like, so I'm going to kind of sum up my feelings on the game as a whole, as I'm feeling sick, and I don't want to keep dragging this out any longer. Overall, this game to me was really decent. I didn't think it was bad by any stretch of the imagination. A lot of people have said this is Xbox's first 10 out of 10, and personally, I'm not quite there. I like the game a lot. I think it's a great game. I put it around the 8 on the AJ scoring system. Yep, we're going to keep that. That's a great acronym right there. How is it ranking on the ass? My point is, it's a damn good game. You will enjoy it, okay? I promise you. It's a solid title. I think it's a great title. It's got a few flaws. It's not perfect. But you know what? Outside of a bit of game jank and some things you have to kind of get used to when adjusting your playstyle, it's a really enjoyable playthrough. The story is good. The actors are good. It's not too glitchy or anything. And man, you'll enjoy yourself. You really will. This is worth whatever asking price it's asking. You should get it and enjoy it. Anyways though, thank you so much for watching this video. I apologise if this one's on the shorter side. I am incredibly sick and I cannot be doing much more voice work. So if I've missed some features here that you may have wanted me to touch on, I apologise humbly. Hopefully next week we'll be back to it with a sick video that's nice and long, nice and lengthy, and diving into the games you know and love. Also, would you look at me, testing out new games. This year we're going to be focusing more on reviews, so if you like reviews and you want to know about the most modern games, get hyped for that. I think the next one we're going to probably do is Avowed. No promises there, but I'm planning on playing it and reviewing it. Okay guys, thanks for watching, take care, I love you all, see you soon.